A man sits in a palace of cedar in Jerusalem, holding a quill over a fresh piece of parchment. They view it as an emotional notebook of a troubled monarch. But if you look closer, the pain ends and a global congregation gathers. The isolation shatters, and the families of the nations bow down. The victim breathes his last, and a new generation wakes up to a finished work. David is no longer writing about an execution. He is writing about an empire of grace spreading across the continents. He declares that the poor will eat and be satisfied. He declares that all the ends of the earth will remember and turn to the Lord. He insists that future generations, people living in centuries he cannot even comprehend, will hear the story of what happened on this specific day. The crucifixion was not an interruption of God's plan. It was the ignition sequence. When we read the ancient text today, we are the people David saw standing on the other side of the pain. We are the unborn generation he promised would hear the news. The shift in the song is so dramatic that you can almost feel the atmosphere in the room change as it is read aloud. The guttural dirge gives way to a rising, triumphant shout. The heavy, suffocating air of the execution site is replaced by the clean, sharp wind of an empty tomb. And this sudden, staggering victory points to the final, definitive line of the song, at the anatomical precision of the torment, at the legal specificities of the crowd, and at the final legal declaration that closes the text. The darkness finally breaks over Jerusalem. The thick, unnatural night that covered the city at noon gives way, and the harsh afternoon sun beats down on the limestone of Golgotha. The man on the center beam pushes up against the rusted iron spike one last time. His lungs scrape against his ribs. His mouth is completely dry, fulfilling the exact physical symptom David recorded when he wrote that his tongue would stick to the roof of his mouth like baked clay. A soldier lifts a stalk of hyssop. A sponge soaked in sour wine is pressed to his cracked lips. He takes a final, agonizing breath. He does not whisper into the wind. He shouts, "It is finished." In the Greek manuscripts of John's Gospel, the word recorded is tetelestai. It is a word of commerce. It is an accounting term written across tax receipts and prison documents, meaning a debt has been paid in full. But Jesus is a Jewish rabbi, bleeding in front of a Jewish crowd, holding the architecture of a Jewish text in his mind. He is not just closing a Roman accounting ledger. He is closing the song. Look at the very last line of King David's 1,000-year-old script. The 22nd Psalm ends with a promise that future generations will be told about the righteousness of the Lord. You realize the traditional reading misses the entire point. Psalm 22 is not a diary entry. It is a script. And the final Hebrew phrase of the song, the closing chord of the entire composition, is ki asa, for he has done it. Or, translated into the functional equivalent of the first century, it is finished. The shout ringing out over the execution grounds is the bookend to the scream that started in the dark 3 hours earlier. Jesus began the execution by reciting verse 1. Now, as his heart fails, he recites verse 31. He has lived through the entire song, every agonizing physical detail, every mocked prayer from the religious elite, every rolled die and divided garment in the dirt below. He absorbed the horrific descent of the first 20 verses. He crossed the hidden pivot of the Father's answer. And now he is declaring the cosmic victory of the finale. The cry is not the gasp of a defeated martyr. It is the slamming of a gavel. He is telling the priests standing in their robes, the soldiers holding their spears, and the women weeping in the dust that the ancient blueprint is fulfilled. The grueling work required to buy back the human race is complete. There is nothing left to write. There is nothing left to suffer. The custody transfer that began with his first scream is now finalized. The king drops his head, the lungs empty. He yields his spirit. It is an eyewitness report written by a man who died 10 centuries before the cross was ever planted in the dirt of Golgotha. The performance of the script is over. But the implication of that final declaration does not stay buried in a first-century tomb. A king writes a song about an execution, and 10 centuries later, a savior bleeds out the lyrics. A holy tether is released in the dark, and the crushing weight of human debt is transferred in full. A scribe elongates a single Hebrew letter, and the exact anatomy of a Roman cross emerges on the parchment. Soldiers roll bone dice for a seamless garment and fulfill a script they do not know exists. Priests hurl ancient insults at a dying man and unwittingly recite the dialogue assigned to them before they were born. A single past tense verb fractures the grammar, and a cosmic victory shatters the isolation. A rabbi shouts that the song is finished, and an empire of grace is ignited in the dirt. One script, one savior. But maybe the part that stays with me most is the custody transfer. The word azab, not the image of a father turning his back in disgust, but the terrifying reality of a father deliberately opening his hand. Jesus was not accidentally abandoned to the violence. The place to start is the exact moment the script was read aloud by its lead actor. Of the empire, he was intentionally handed over. Every torn nerve, every rolled die, every labored breath was part of a redemptive sequence written in a cedar palace 10 centuries before the wood was ever planted in Golgotha. If you are in a season where your suffering feels entirely random, where you feel completely handed over to a darkness you cannot control, Psalm 22 is a place to sit. The silence of God is not his absence. Your pain is not proof that the narrative has failed. Sometimes, the darkest, most isolating moments of your life are exactly where the hidden pivot is waiting to turn. Because the same God who choreographed the darkest afternoon in human history knows exactly how your story crosses into the Pappus, light. If this reframed how you see the cross, subscribe and leave a comment. Even one word helps. Share this with someone who feels like they are standing in the dark, wondering where God went. Pray for us as we keep digging into these ancient texts. And may the God who wrote the final declaration of your deliverance before you were even born, to hold you tightly in the shadows until he brings you safely into the light. For centuries, theologians have wrestled with the final, echoing scream of Jesus from the cross, when the sky over Jerusalem goes black at noon, and he cries out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Modern readers often hear a moment of complete psychological collapse. We assume the physical agony finally broke his mind, or that the sheer spiritual weight of human failure caused a temporary fracture in the divine timeline. We tend to read this moment as the spontaneous, desperate shriek of a dying man who has finally lost his grip on hope. But that assumption ignores the way first-century Jewish teachers actually operated. In the ancient world of Judea, long before the invention of the printing press, it is 1,000 years before the Roman Empire will invent crucifixion as a public ritual of state terror. The man is King David, or the convenience of chapter and verse divisions. The Hebrew scriptures were memorized by heart and sung aloud. If a rabbi wanted to draw his audience's attention to a specific passage, he did not cite a page number or unroll a massive leather scroll. He used a technique called remez a hint. He simply recited the first line of a well-known text. This cultural memory device was designed to pull an entire theological framework into the present moment. With a single breath, when Jesus pushes his weight upward against a rusted iron spike, tearing the nerve endings in his feet just to pull enough oxygen into his collapsing lungs, he is not losing his mind to the pain. He is reciting a title track. He is quoting the precise opening line of King David's 1,000-year-old song, demanding that the crowd of Pharisees and priests standing below him mentally retrieve the rest of the lyrics. The scream echoing over the limestone hill is not a random expression of human despair. It is a calculated, deliberate hyperlink to a prophetic script. By uttering those specific words in the thick, unnatural darkness, Jesus is forcing the religious leaders to watch their own actions fulfill a text they have memorized since they were boys. He is holding up a mirror to the executioners and the audience, daring them to recognize the scene they are participating in. When the religious authorities hear, my God," their minds would automatically autocomplete the rest of the psalm. He is not fighting a war today. He is not running from King Saul in the caves of En Gedi. they would instantly recall the ancient imagery of a righteous sufferer surrounded by enemies, mocked by onlookers, his bones pulled entirely out of joint. Jesus is weaponizing their own biblical literacy against them. He is telling them, in the exact moment they think they have won the theological debate by putting him to death, that they are merely playing the roles assigned to them 10 centuries prior. He is not asking a question. He is making an accusation. The scream on the cross is not a surrender. It is a victory lap. But to understand how he is winning, you have to look past the English word forsaken. You have to look at the exact Hebrew verb David chose to write down when he composed the opening line of the song, because the transaction happening in the dark is far more precise than a simple abandonment. The sky above Jerusalem is pitch black. The air is heavy. Dust settles on the limestone hill. Jesus pushes upward. Wood splinters tear into his back. He gasps for breath. He screams the ancient lyric, my God, why have you forsaken me?" In English, that word feels emotional. It sounds like a breakup. It sounds like a father turning his back, shutting his eyes, and walking away in disgust. But the word David actually inks onto the parchment in Psalm 22 is the Hebrew azab. It means to loosen the bands, to relinquish. He is writing a song, a poem, a cry of the soul that begins with a scream, to leave destitute. It is a word of deliberate release. In Nehemiah chapter 9, the prophet looks back at the wandering in the desert. He says God did not azab the Israelites in the wilderness. He did not release his grip. He held on to them. He gave them water. He gave them manna. He kept them safely tethered to his protection. On the cross, the tether is cut. The grip is released. The Father does not turn away because he cannot stand to look at sin. He steps back so the full, crushing weight of human debt can finally land on the man on the wood. Azab is not a loss of affection. It is a transfer of custody. Jesus is handed over. He is released to the executioners. He is given up to the violence of the empire and the wrath of the law. He is absorbing the total isolation that humanity earned. The spiritual transaction happening in the dark is terrifying, but the spiritual transaction is only half the prophecy, because the physical details David writes in the very next stanza are impossible. The detail that changes everything is hiding in a single stroke of ink on dried animal skin. For hundreds of years, scholars have fought bitterly over verse 16 of King David's song. If you read the Masoretic text, but as the ink dries on the page, the details he records begin to drift away from his own life. The standard Hebrew Bible finalized by scribes in the Middle Ages. The line translates to a strange, almost incomplete thought. It reads, like a lion. They are at my hands and my feet. But if you read the Septuagint, the Greek translation produced by Jewish scholars in Alexandria centuries before Jesus was even born, the sentence describes something far more violent. It reads, "They have pierced my hands and my feet." The entire theological conflict comes down to a microscopic difference in the shape of a single letter. The Hebrew word for like a lion is ka'ari, ending in the letter yod, a tiny suspension mark hanging in the air. The Hebrew word for they pierced or they dug is ka'aru or kara, ending in the letter vav, a straight vertical line extending slightly further down the page. When archaeologists pulled the Dead Sea Scrolls out of the limestone caves of Qumran and held the ancient fragments of Psalm 22 up to the light, they found the elongated stroke of the vav. The older text did not describe an animal attack. It described an execution. It described a Roman crucifixion, penned by an Israelite king 1,000 years before the Roman Empire. He describes a dry throat, a rib cage pulling apart under extreme weight, and public executioners standing around a dying body. Gambling for clothes existed. In a culture where the standard method of execution was crushing a man under heavy stones, if feeling the historical weight of these ancient manuscripts makes you realize how much of the Bible you have never truly seen, you're exactly who this channel is for. Drop a thought in the comments and hit subscribe, because every week we go deeper into the text than you knew was possible. So the anatomical precision on the page demands an explanation. David goes on to describe his bones staring out from his skin. His skeletal structure stretched completely out of joint. He details a heart turning to wax, melting within the chest cavity. This is a shockingly accurate medical description of a pericardial effusion, when a human body is suspended by the wrists. The chest cavity locks into an inhaled position, forcing the victim to push upward on pierced feet just to exhale. The heart beats faster and faster to compensate for the lack of oxygen, eventually surrounding itself with fluid before it ruptures under the immense pressure. David is writing out the exact physiological sequence of cardiac arrest caused by a wooden cross. This is not poetic exaggeration. David will never experience this death. He will die an old man in a warm bed, surrounded by servants and royal wealth. It is forensic prophecy, but the physical torment is only the backdrop, because David did not just see what was happening to the body suspended in the air. He saw exactly what was happening in the dirt directly beneath it. Roman soldiers sit in the dirt. The limestone is hard against their armor. Above them, a man bleeds. Below him, a game begins. The protocol of crucifixion is ruthless. The victim is stripped of everything. Even his clothes belong to the empire. The execution squad claims the spoils. They take his outer cloak. They rip the fabric. They divide it into 4 shares, 1 piece for each guard. Then, they pick up the inner tunic. It is woven from top to bottom. It has no seams. It is a seamless garment, constructed exactly like the tunic worn by the high priest when he enters the Holy of Holies. To tear this fabric is to ruin it. To cut it is to destroy its value. Someone pulls out the dice. Bone rolls against rock. Knuckles hit the dirt. They gamble for a blood-stained shirt. They play a game of chance while the man who wore it suffocates just inches above their heads. 1,000 years earlier, a king dips his quill. He writes the exact scene. They divide my garments among them, and for my clothing they cast lots. The soldiers are not just splitting the spoils of an execution. He is not recording his past. He is staging a future. Most people read the opening line of this psalm. They are fulfilling a script they do not know exists. The crowd steps forward. The religious leaders gather at the foot of the wood. The priests wag their heads. They hurl insults into the heavy, dark air. They shout the very words they think prove the bleeding man is a fraud. He trusts in the Lord. Let him deliver him. Let him rescue him. For he delights in him. They laugh at his silence. They mock his isolation. They weaponize his own trust against him. But David wrote those exact syllables, verbatim, 10 centuries before the priests ever opened their mouths. The religious elite are not delivering a spontaneous theological critique. They are reciting lines. They are actors, walking across a stage they think they own, completely unaware that their dialogue was documented a millennium before they were born. Every sneer is recorded. Every wagging head is prophesied. Every cast of the dice is predetermined. The entire ecosystem of the execution was choreographed. The executioners think they are in charge. The priests think they have won. The crowd thinks they are witnessing a failure. But the man on the wood knows exactly what chapter he is in. And then, right in the middle of the blood and the dust and the mockery, the ancient song abruptly shifts. The cry of dereliction stops. The desperate pleas for help vanish. Because in verse 21, the dying man hears something, and assume it is just David having a bad day. A poetic exaggeration of a king feeling distant from God. Look at the architecture of the ancient text. We often think of Psalm 22 as a tragedy. We frame it as the saddest song in the Psalter, a dark night of the soul that Jesus borrowed in his darkest hour. For 21 verses, the song is a descent into complete darkness. It is a suffocating inventory of torn flesh, dry mouths, and roaring enemies. The poetry itself gasps for air. The syllables are heavy, dragging the reader down into the dirt where the dice are rolling. But halfway through verse 21, the grammar fractures. The Hebrew text pivots on a single, shocking past tense verb. Save me from the mouth of the lion. From the horns of the wild oxen you have answered me. Anatha, you answered me. The cry for help does not fade away into silence. It crashes directly into an answer. This is not a psychological coping mechanism. It is a resurrection. From that exact syllable to the bottom of the parchment, the blood disappears. The mockery stops. The agonizing physical breakdown vanishes entirely from the text. The camera zooms out from a lone, bleeding man surrounded by executioners to a cosmic, blinding celebration. The song explodes into absolute light. The rhythm of the poem transforms.